Hi guys, I'm Brian McCauley and welcome to McCauley's Design Workshop. Today I'm going to show you how I built this reclaimed wood dining room table. If you'd like to see how I did it, stick around.
This lumber is heart pine, and it came from a floor out of a brownstone in Baltimore. It's about 150 years old. So the first thing I need to do is remove all of the metal from it. It's got nails and staples and all kinds of other junk in there. All of this lumber is tongue and groove, so it has a tongue on one edge and a groove on the other. After I removed the metal from it, I went ahead and ripped off the tongue and groove from each side. With that done, I could treat it just like it was rough lumber, so I took it to my jointer and flattened one face and straightened one edge. Next, it was to the table saw to make the other edge of the board parallel to the one I just straightened on the jointer. And finally, I planed all the boards to a consistent thickness. They ended up being about 5/8 of an inch thick, and this stuff is rock hard. It really did a number on all of the knives on my jointer and my planer, and I even had to get a new blade for my table saw. With the milling out of the way, I could glue up the tabletop as well as the panels for the legs of the table. Because my boards ended up being 5/8 of an inch thick, I decided to use plywood as a substrate for this table. So I used my track saw to cut it into more manageable pieces before taking it to my basement workshop. I then used my table saw to cut the plywood to its final size. Then I cut the panels for the legs to their final width. And then I cut the plywood panels for the legs. With everything more or less cut out, I could start on some assembly. So I began with the tabletop, and I attached the sides to the table using glue and brad nails. Next, I started attaching the heart pine to the tabletop. Here I just used, again, glue and brad nails. The nice thing about working with this reclaimed lumber is that it's already got nail holes and other character to it, so I didn't even have to worry about hiding the brad nails. here I'm marking one of the sides so that I can cut it at my chop saw. For the top of the table, I only put glue down the center. And I also only nailed down the center. This is going to allow the tabletop to expand and contract. I don't expect it to move much because the majority of this lumber was quarter sawn, but I figured better safe than sorry. I did nail it from the bottom across the whole width, but I figured if the table moves, the small brat nails would just move with it. Next, I used my track saw to cut off the majority of the waste on the tabletop. Next, I used a flush trim bit in my router to make the tabletop flush to the sides. With the building on the top finished, I could focus on the legs. Essentially, I'm making a plywood sandwich here with 2 plywood panels in between 2 heart pine panels. Next, I cut the completed panels to width and length. With the added height of my crosscut sled, my blade wasn't tall enough to go completely through the panels, so I needed to finish the cuts off by hand. Next, I used my hand planes to level where the sides of the leg panels meet the faces of the leg panels. With that done, I could start on the joinery for the legs, and for this I used my domino. And then I glued the leg panels together to create the leg assemblies for the table. Normally I would use my hand planes to flatten a tabletop, however there's still a decent amount of metal left in this wood and I didn't want to ruin my irons and my planes by using it on the tabletop, so I decided to use my belt sander. And then, once that was finished, I could lay out for the placement of the leg assemblies. This is a rail that will be used to join the 2 leg assemblies together to create the base of the table. I used the layout lines that I created on the bottom of the table to find the angles that I needed to cut for these stretchers. Then I had to cut all the joinery for this by hand. I realized as I was trying to figure out a way to cut this that I had no way to do it with my power tools, so I had to break out the saw, the chisel, and the mallet to get this base together. To chisel out this waist, I started by establishing the line with my chisels and pairing to it, taking small pieces of waste at a time. And as my line became more established, I was able to remove more and more waste. Once I got about halfway through, I flipped the leg over and repeated the process from the other side. With the bulk of the waste removed, I could do some test fits and sort of finesse the joint so that the rail would fit in nicely. Next, I gave the leg assemblies sanding up to 220 grit. And to create the base, I glued and screwed the rails into place. And to prepare for finish, I sanded the tabletop up to 220 grit as well. To finish the table, I wiped on 3 coats of polyurethane and sanded between each coat with 220 grit sandpaper. And here are some photos of the finished piece. Let me know what you think in the comments below.
Alright guys, so that's it. Pretty simple build. I'll tell you what, that reclaimed heart pine was super tough on all my blades. I had to replace nearly all the blades in my shop. My table saw blade, my planer blades, my joiner blades. It was crazy. But the nice thing about using the reclaimed material is that I was able to use my brad nailer and nail things together. Since the wood already had tons of nail holes and character and all that stuff, it was pretty much hidden. I didn't have to worry about it. So if you've got some reclaimed lumber in your lumber pile, hopefully this will give you some ideas of something to do with it. Alright guys, thanks for watching.
Be sure to follow me on my website, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.